Those Days with the Monsters, Part 22.
Kirrel Nectar, Liaison to the Cumins, Report 14.
Kirrel sighed, more conscious than he had ever been of the machines and the whirring in the medical bay. It wasn't very professional to provide a report lying down, but he wasn't confident in his ability to stand up until the report was finished. He seemed to be having some trouble with getting strength back, and he really couldn't put off this report any longer.
The Cumins have developed something very impressive. I'd call it a miracle if their entire existence didn't depend on 1,000 events of the same kind. At this point it's just more evidence that Khumans shouldn't even exist. But, well, they've created a serum or injection or something that's supposed to keep them from infecting the rest of the galaxy. There's a bit of an issue early on with some kind of bacteria species they call something like Varibaculum. But apparently the problem species dies very quickly after an injection, so the Cumins are only infectious for 3 days or so. Unfortunately, I appear to be the reason why they discovered this infection at all. I apologise for the late report, by the way.
Kirrel found himself fighting the urge to mention that he was told reports would be expected if he was not too ill to make them, and he had, in fact, been too ill to make them. That sounded, if not insubordinate, at least sassier than he was comfortable with saying in an official report. He wondered where that had come from. He hadn't been like this on Core 5.
The captain is glad that they've all been treated. He seems less angry than before, and said something about being able to really get started. Now, I overheard Doc begging him to give some kind of ultimatum, but the captain kept saying things like, "They had their chance," and "we can't afford a leak." Whatever that means. Everyone's been pretty busy. I don't get to see many of the Khumans aside from Doc right now. That's certainly a downside to being stuck in a hospital bed. Not that there are too many upsides. Doc keeps doing things with what's left of the Tizix. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but he seemed annoyed by it, whatever it is. He's used some words that aren't in the lexicon they gave us. I've been told they're swears, but no one will explain why or what they mean. Alex, that's the Khuman who teaches them how to...
Kirrel paused, trying to figure out how to explain Alex's job and just how incredibly precise it was. He couldn't find a way.
Well, she teaches how to hit things with your appendages. It sounds silly, but she's amazing. Anyway, she stopped saying those words entirely. Apparently she used to say them a lot more, but stopped when I came onto the Khuman ship. I don't know why.
He also didn't know why the entire crew had roared with amusement when Alex finally announced that it was because he was on the ship now. Given how no one would explain to him, he might never know.
The captain has brought us away from Khuman space again. Did I mention that we were in Khuman space? I don't remember if I did or not. Everything gets a bit hazy for a while. It may be the antibiotics. Whether I mentioned it or not, we were in Khuman space for a short time. I assumed to get the serum or whatever they call it. I've never seen so many Khuman stairs in my life. It was very intimidating.
Kirrel remembered what they'd done to the Tizix with a fraction of the numbers he'd seen.
Still, the Khumans on this ship acted protective, like they were warning off the other Khumans. It might be a territory dispute or something. I don't know where we are now, though. I just know we've left Khuman space. The captain keeps coming down to the med bay and whispering to Doc. Even though he hasn't been as angry, he looks unhappy every time he talks to Doc. The last time, he sighed, and when he left he was calling Sleepy, Dopey, and...
Kirrel paused, then decided to use the Galactic Standard translation of the name.
Happy, to the bridge. He didn't look pleased. By the way, the translator seems to be glitching sometimes when it tries to read Khuman faces. It's mostly when the Khumans use a face that looks like a normal face, but isn't. Did you know Khumans have 42 different muscles in their faces? That leads to a lot of expressions. I really don't know how the translator keeps up with most of them. But then there are expressions that almost don't use face muscles.
Kirrel's frills flushed a rich purple as he realised how unprofessional that sounded.
I mean, that the expressions don't have a specific change. It's not like their teeth-baring face, or their angry face, or their sad face. It's an expression, but not an expression. I don't know how to explain it. The face when they decided that the Tizik's borders were going to die was one of those faces. I admit that it makes things a bit difficult as a cultural liaison, but I seem to be adapting to it. A few times I've been able to distinguish between those faces. I admit that it took me a while. As I said before, the Cumins have been working pretty hard since we left Khuman space. I don't know what they're working on, but it feels like they're preparing for something big. Not to tell you how to do your jobs, but this might be a good time to discuss things with them. In an official capacity, I mean. I don't know if the captain will listen if you do, but there's a chance.
Kirrel cleared his throat, stopped the recording and sent it. He hoped enough information would come across in the report to make something happen in the bureaucratic slog that the DIA seemed to be. On the other side of the room, Doc sighed as some sort of machine started whirring. Kirrel, look, I appreciate the attempt, but I don't think they're going to respond in time. We're pretty close now, and I don't think anything they say will change the captain's mind. Not anymore. He's fed up with them, and to be honest, I think most of the rest of us are too. He paused, then sighed again. Myself included. I asked the captain to reconsider, mostly because I didn't want it to be my fault, not because I actually thought they'd answer. I think it's too late for them to say anything now. The ship, as if in answer, lurched slightly. Kirrel felt the whole world turn inside out as the ship exited FTL jump much more smoothly than he had expected. Had Grumpy improved the ship again? Or, Kirrel was afraid to think it, but the idea came in spite of his efforts.
The last time, when we entered jump so roughly, was it because something had gone wrong?
But Doc seemed to have expected the jump to be rough. What did Doc know about that jump that Kirrel hadn't known? Kirrel sighed, shook his head, and resolutely focused on what he could do to speed up his recovery. He could worry about unsettling questions later. Thanks for coming back to listen to episode 22 of Those Days with the Monsters. Read by me, A Good Bean.